And if you guys have questions, feel free to interrupt me. As usual, I'm only recording my screen and my microphone, so you won't be part of the recording if you do want to talk or have any questions or comments. Um, we are continuing with conditional logic. On this page, there's a couple things I realized are really more relevant to what we're doing next week. And so I might move some stuff around a little bit, but we're not going to go past where we went on Monday night because it's really more relevant to the animation stuff that we're going to start doing next week. So we'll talk about it then. Um, but what we'll do tonight instead is a demo. And I have this like drawing with logic. This is also kind of like, I'm going to go through these examples just so you can see a few more things. But most of what I'm going to do tonight is a demo where I'm going to talk about creating states and tracking states. So I'll go through these slides. There's some examples in here that I think are interesting. But I'm not going to, use these in the demo. I'm just going to kind of talk about them, except for the last one that we're going to see. We'll take a look at that, and then I'm going to do a demo based on that. And so in this one, I'm talking about drawing with logic, and basically it's a similar concept to what we're going to look at with the demo, which is basically using conditions of the environment of our program to track states and create different types of applications. So in this case, we're using some code to make like a really simple drawing program. And so it's kind of similar to some stuff that we've seen in the past, where I can just kind of like draw on this canvas, and on one side of the page we get one color, and another side of the page we get a different color. So it's not really that practical of an application, but you could imagine keeping track of color states in different ways. And this is using something that we talked about on Monday. It's pretty straightforward. We're basically using two separate conditions. One is here, if the mouse X is greater than the half of the canvas, width over 2, we're going to use that light blue color. And otherwise, we're going to use the plum color. So that's our if-else statement. And then we have if mouse is pressed. And so this means that we're only going to draw ellipses if we are moving the mouse. And so that's how I get this nice little drawing. I'm also not drawing a background in this example, which is why we see all of those shapes stay on the canvas. If I was drawing a background like something like that, then we would just kind of see a circle moving around. So just to kind of show what's happening there. And so you can see how this would apply to different types of programs. In this case, I'm using some math to make the circle larger as if I move farther across the page. And so I'm just using some basic math here. I'm taking the difference between the position of the X of the mouse each time. And then here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And this is the part I think I'm going to save for next week, where we're doing some compound conditionals. This is really kind of like trying to cover too much at once. So this is what I really want to talk about, is state changes. And so we're just going to keep using simple conditionals, but we're going to add variables together with our conditionals in order to keep track of a state in our program. And so we can look at a couple different ways to do this. So here, in this example, this is a very simple one. Basically, I have my self-portrait. This is an example of a self-portrait. And when I click the mouse, you can see the mouth opens. And if I'm not clicking the mouse, the mouth stays closed. And so that just creates a really simple interaction where I can kind of make it look like the self-portrait is talking. I can hold the mouth open. I can kind of make different little expressions. And so you can see this relationship between state and interaction. And so the way I'm doing that is pretty simple. I'm just using this variable up here for the mouth size. And so to start, it's just 10 pixels. So that's how tall the mouth is going to be by default. So if I don't do anything, or if my user doesn't do anything, that's when we get the default setting where we see the mouth is very small. And then this little bit of code down here basically says if the mouse is pressed, then we're going to make the mouth larger. So if the mouse is pressed, we increase the height to 50. And then else, we set it back to 10. So that's how we get it to go up and down. If I didn't have this else statement in here, what I would see is it gets stuck at that 50, because I'm not accounting for the variable changing. So we can see that with a variable, we don't just have an on and off state. We actually have a state that kind of persists each time we go through the draw function. So that variable is outside of our function, so we can have this change that's permanent as opposed to what we did on Monday, where it's really just like on or off. And as soon as I take the mouse press off, it goes back to the original um, drawing. So here's one with a few different expressions where I kind of move. Oh, whoops, where'd it go? Up here. I kind of move the mouse around. And we're going to skip this one again. This is more related to what we're doing next week. So I'm going to skip this one and we'll take a look at this last one. And this is the one that we're going to do a demo on. So instead of having to move the mouse around, what we want to do is just use one click. And so again, instead of clicking on and off, what we want to do is click and then cycle through a series of events. So that means we have the sequence, we have to keep track of this value. There's no other way to do this other than using a variable and keeping track of a value. And so I'm going to go through this code in the demo, but I'll just show this example real quick, and then we will see the code. So we have the default setting here, and then we have this one expression, and then another expression, and then a final expression. And the counter or the number is keeping track of which expression to draw. And so we have this separation now between the interaction when it occurs and the data that we're saving as we draw our drawing. And so that allows us to stay on those states and then move to the next state when we're ready, when we trigger the next event. And so this gives us a lot more control over what's happening in the program. And as I mentioned before, you really need to keep track of states. A lot of writing code is keeping track of different states in your program. Again, whether it's levels in a video game or windows on or like tabs on your browser, all of these programs have to do things to keep track of what should I be drawing on the screen right now. Should it be the menu? Should it be level 1? Should it be the third tab or the fourth tab? So keeping track of these different states is really essential to be able to creating programs. So I'm going to do this with the meme. So I'm going to go over to my P5 editor and I'll log in here. And I'm going to go and open the meme that I created on Monday night. It looks like I forgot to write a comment on here. Oh no, this was my example with the stoplight, although I should still write a comment up there, but I'm going to move on. Here's my interactive meme. Okay. So again, in this one, I have my first section, which is my cat section, and then I have my dog section. But notice it's just on and off. I can't go to the dog and then stay there. So once I click once, I have to hold it. And what I really want to be able to do is move through a sequence of different states. And so we're going to look at how to do that now. We'll start with just the first two, and then we can add on to it. And then once you have, one sequence, it's very easy to add on as many as you want. So I'm going to update this comment up here at the top and just describe what I'm doing in this example. So I'm going to call this my interactive meme 2 example. And the date is the 15th. And I'm going to still use the same images, so I can leave those image citations there. And most of the code will stay the same. So I have my cat image, I have my dog image. I need to, of course, preload both of those images. And then I have my setup function where I'm just creating the canvas. So we can leave that the same. And then I have my draw function. And here I'm first setting the tint to default and drawing my cat image. And then I set my text setup. And then I'm saying if I press the mouse, I want to change the tint and draw my dog image and change the text to say I'm a sad dog. And then else, I'm going to change this text to say I'm a cat. Okay, so again, what we have here is just this on-off event, if the mouse is pressed or not. And what I want to do is switch this to follow a state. I'm going to simplify a couple things here just so I can keep my code nice and tidy. So one thing that I'm going to realize off the bat with my text setup is that I'm never changing it. The text always looks the same. So instead of having this all in the middle here, I might as well just put this in the setup function so I don't have to worry about it because I'm not changing it. So once I set up the basic text that I want, I don't need to change it. So I'm just going to put that in the setup, do it once, and then I can simplify my code a little bit. Okay, so now we have two different things that we want to show. And to simplify this further, I'm going to move my cat meme into the else statement. So we can see that we basically have these two different sections of our code. Oh, and I have to move the text down here. So we have I'm a cat, I'm a sad dog. And so we basically have the same thing. We've just simplified the code a little bit. So one of the things that's a little bit counterintuitive about this is that the first thing we see is the cat because that's the else. That in this case, the else is the sort of the default condition. We can of course change that very easily. If I said if not mouse is pressed, suddenly the dog is the first thing that we see because I'm looking for the opposite of that event if mouse is not pressed. But a better semantic way to write this is just to kind of say like what is the state of the meme, and so that's what we are going to do. So to do this, we need a variable that exists outside of our draw function that can keep track of the state even while we're drawing over here. So we're going to be drawing here, but we need a variable that's unaffected by our draw function to keep track of what the state is so that it doesn't constantly get reset or changed to something else. So I'm going to put this up here in my main variables. I'll put a comment here and say this is my state tracker. And you can really call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call this variable state. And usually in programming, we start at 0, but this is just keeping track of a number, so there's no reason we can't start at 1. So we're going to say if the state is 1, we're going to draw our first part of our meme. And then if the state is 2, then we'll go to the second part. And we can keep some notes here if we want to. So the state for 1 should be the cat with the caption, I'm a cat. And the state for 2 is going to be the dog saying, I'm a sad dog. Since we're not actually going to have to name all the states up here, taking some notes will help to remember which state is which. So now we just need to use a conditional statement to compare the current state to this value. So instead of saying if mouse is pressed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if state, and here I'm going to use the double equal sign because I'm comparing the number that's held in the state variable, which is going to change, to the number that I want to check. So I'm going to compare it to 1. And we can use triple equal sign here that's kind of the convention. That's what people like to use. Either one really is fine here. So now I'm just going to move my cat stuff up here. So I can say if the state is 1, we're going to draw the cat, the first scene of our cat image. And now we can move to our next condition if the state equals 2. And so, we might say this should be an else statement. You could put it as an else statement, but as long as the state doesn't change during one draw function, then you won't really have to worry about this because if the state is 1, it's not going to be 2. So unless the state can change somewhere from between here and here, then we really don't need an else statement there. So now here's the new part that we haven't really talked about yet. So let's see if this works. I'm going to run this. So if the state is 1, we see the cat image, and that looks good. And if I change the state to 2, now we see the dog image. But I can't change this yet. We haven't added the interactivity yet. If I change the state to 3, we're not going to see anything because we didn't put anything in those. We didn't create a condition for that. So let's go back to 1. That's the default state. Okay, so, whoops. Again, if the state is 1, we're drawing our cat and we're writing our cat text here. And if the state is 2, we're drawing our dog and we're writing our dog text down here. So now we have to use an event to update the state so we can move to the next state. Okay, so we're going to use the mouse pressed event. It's already here, so that's kind of nice. But let's pretend it wasn't here for a second in case you don't have it there. I would just, so the mouse press function just happens once. It's not inside the draw function like mouse is pressed. That's going to give us some trouble because the draw function is always running. So if we try to do this over there, we might, set our state back and forth a lot, and that's going to be tricky to manage. So instead, I'm going to put it in the mouse press function, which I know is only going to trigger once when I press the mouse. So I'm going to write my new function, mouse pressed. And this might be a little confusing because we were just using uh, mouse is pressed. And let's actually look at the P5 reference page for just a second. We can see that those are two different things. So let's go to the reference. These are both events, but they're different types of events. So if we go to events, you can see here's mouse is pressed. That's just a value, true or false, if the mouse is pressed right now. And then here we have mouse pressed with parentheses. So that's a function that gets called when the mouse is pressed. So the code inside our function gets run when we click the mouse. Um, so let's go back to our code. So when the mouse is pressed, we want to increase the state. Okay, so we're going to say state, and then we're going to add 1. So this is kind of like saying state equals 2, but that's not as useful. I'll show you guys why in a second. So what we really want, let's start there. So we want the state to go from 1 to 2. Okay, so you can say the state is 1, I click, and now it's 2. However, now it's stuck at 2. I can't change it beyond that. Okay, so another thing that I can do here is I can say state equals state plus 1. And that's going to let me go past 2. Okay, so it just keeps going up. And we're not going to see this because we haven't written the other states, but I'm going to log it so we'll see it in the log. So I'm going to console.log and say state and show the state number. Okay, so let's open the console just a little bit and let's run that. So we have I'm a cat. Then when state turns to 2, now we have I'm a dog. But notice when I keep clicking, the state keeps going up and I haven't created conditions for the other states yet. Okay, so we need to create those conditions, but first, let's update our code a little bit so that we can go back to the beginning. Okay, so state is 2, then state turns to 3, and we don't see anything. Okay, so another way to write this that is a little bit of a shorthand, I can say state equals state plus 1. That's the same thing as saying state plus equals 1. There's a shorthand for this because we do it a lot in code. Basically what's happening is we're figuring out what is state currently. We're doing some operation, which is just adding 1, and then we're putting it back into the variable. So that's a very common operation, and so we have a shorthand for this, which is plus equals. We can also, with 1, we can just say state plus plus, because adding 1 to a variable is such a common thing in programming because we're always counting stuff. There's an even shorter way to write this, but that always means 1. Whereas with plus equals, I could say 10, or I could say -1. I could do different stuff. So we'll do state plus plus. I'll leave those there just as an example. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if we are already at the end of our memes, and then we'll go back to the beginning. So I can use another condition here, and I can say if we get above 2, because we only have 2 right now, so I can say if state, is greater than 2. We only have 1 and 2 right now. We have if state equals 1, we draw the cat. If state equals 2, we draw this dog. Okay, so if we get above 2, that means we've run out of our states. We have to go back to the beginning. That's really easy. I just say state equals 1. We just go back to where we started. And we'll change these numbers in a second, but we can see that this is going to work now. So now I have my cat, and if I click, notice I'm not touching the mouse anymore. We just see the dog image by itself. So we've saved this information, and now we're still drawing, but the information is staying consistent. So that's a really powerful thing to be able to do with a program. And now if I click again, we go back to 1. And so we can cycle between these two states. And now we can actually add more to this. So we can make more components or more states to our meme. So I'm going to add a couple states, and then we'll update the program. So let's go if state equals 3. So this time I'm going to go back to the cat image. So I'll copy this and paste it down here. And of course, I still need text, so I'll just copy this and just edit the text. and I'll have the cat respond to the dog. The cat can say, I'm sorry, you are sad. I don't know why this is about the dog being sad, but I guess that's because the image that I found was a sad dog. So the cat says, I'm sorry, you are sad. And so now we have to update our code because we're still just checking if we're above state 2, but now we have 3 states. So instead of saying if state is greater than 2, we're going to increase this number to 3. So now we're going to go to 3, and then if the state is greater than 3, we go back to 1. Okay, so now we have I'm a cat, I'm a sad dog, and the cat says, I'm sorry, you're sad. It goes outside of the box, so we're going to have to adjust that just a little bit. So I'll go back up to the text and give this text box a width. I'll try 300, see what that looks like. So then that moves it over. So that's going to make it a little more complicated. So let's see. We'll have to fix this. So I just have to move it up and over a little bit. Let's try like that. I'm a cat. I'm a dog. I'm sorry you're sad. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so the cat says, I'm sorry that you're sad. And let's add one more just for the hell of it. So then we can say if state equals 4. Now we're going to go back to the dog image. So I'm just going to copy this. I could have actually just copied that whole block and just changed the number, but I already wrote it. So let's just copy the insides and paste it inside here. So if the state equals 4, we're just going to have the dog say, thanks. Or yeah, that's fine, whatever, it doesn't matter, just for the demo's sake. So I'm a cat, I'm a sad dog, I'm sorry you're sad. Whoops, okay, we have to update our mouse pressed. So now we have 4 states. So if we go above 4, we want to go back to 1. So we have I'm a cat, I'm a sad dog, I'm sorry you're sad, thanks. And then we go back to the beginning. Or we can add more to it, or we could just end it. You could have like, you could say if state is greater than 4, then just stop and don't keep going. So there's different ways that you could do it. You don't have to cycle back to the beginning, but that's just the way that it's set up. Okay, so that's basically it. You can add as many states, you can draw different things in the states. It doesn't have to go back and forth between the cat and the dog. It could just be new text each time or new images. Whatever you think is interesting, is fine to do here. The main part I'm demonstrating is just how to add these multiple sections. And so we can start to create a sequence, or, it's kind of like a little comic, or like kind of a little narrative that we're starting to build. So I just want to go over exactly what's happening down here a little bit more, and then I'll let you guys start working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log a bunch of times each time I do this. So I'm going to console.log the state, and this is just a string, just so it's labeling this is the state. So let's call this state 1, and then I'm going to show the number here. And then I'm going to copy that, and now we're going to see state 2, and then we're going to go down here and we're going to see state 3. So each time we click, we're going to see what happens to the state. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and let's make the console just a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so that's the first time I clicked. So the state in the first place was 1. Okay, so state 1 is equal to 1. Then the next thing that happens is we say plus plus, so we add 1 to the state. Okay, so that gives us state 2. We can see that that number is 2. Okay, so then we say if the state is greater than 4. Well, 2 is not greater than 4. We know that. So this if statement just gets ignored. This doesn't happen. So that's why when we get down to state number 3, here's state 3, that value is still 2. And we're going to see the same thing happen the next couple times around. So I'm going to click again, and we see this update again. So here we are down here. So we're back to the beginning. State 1 is 2, so we're still at 2. So even though we've drawn the image a bunch more times, the state has stayed the same. Then we say state plus plus. So then the second time, now it's 3. And then again, 3 is less than 4. So this statement here is not true. State is not greater than 4. And so we stay at 3. Okay, let's clear this and go again. Okay, so this time state is still 3, Now it's 4. And we still don't do this because 4 is still not greater than 4. 4 is the same as 4. Okay, so that means that state 3 is still 4. And then once I click again, now we see the change. So state starts out at 4. We add 1. There is no state 5. That's why it's set up this way. So when we say is 5 greater than 4, obviously that's true. And so then we set the state back to 1. We see down here that our state is back to 1. So we've cycled through all of our states and we go back to 1. And again, it doesn't have to go back to the beginning. That's just like one way to do it. I could say, I could put a Boolean in front of state plus plus and only add 1 if we're still below 4. There's different ways to kind of control the way that the program works, but that's just one example of that. All right, so I think that is everything I want to cover. I will put a link to this in the um, voice channel to this example. And actually, let me change the name here. Oh, whoops, I didn't make a duplicate. I didn't follow my own instructions from Monday. So I should have duplicated this before I rewrote it. I'll fix this later. So I'm just going to rename this, or I'm going to duplicate this, and I'll rename this meme2. And actually, that gives me a new link. So let me delete this one. Okay, and I'll fix the other one later. Okay, so with this one, since we have a bunch of different states, we are going to need to, when we document this, we're going to need to get an image of each one of those states. It's not interactive, so it's not as quite as hard because there's not like moving parts or whatever. But I'm going to throw my my save image in here, and I'm going to put it before I change the state just to make sure I save each one before they go away. So I'm going to save meme2.png, and this will make a few images in my downloads folder. So I'm going to run this, and so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And so those should all be in my downloads folder. Let's go ahead and open up. Here's my downloads folder. So we have I'm a cat. And they're kind of in a weird order because it adds these numbers to the end since they have the same name, but that's fine. Actually, I could put the state in the name of the file. So I could say meme2 dash plus state plus .png. So now it'll actually save each one of my images with the right extension. Might as well use it since it's there. So we have I'm a cat, I'm a sad dog, I'm sorry you're sad, thanks. So now I have a bunch of images. And one thing, I don't think I've showed this before, so I'm just going to do a quick example of this because I haven't really like demoed anything about posting on the Open Lab in a while. So when I'm ready to post this, I can just go to the Open Lab and click on the plus button. And of course, I'm going to choose a category. So I'm going to look for interactive logo slash meme. And I'll say, here's my interactive meme. And then one thing that you can do on the Open Lab, I don't know if I've showed this before, but you can actually add a gallery. So if I click on this plus button and click gallery, I can add all of my images at once. So I can click upload, I can drag and drop, but I'm just going to click upload and grab all of those. And now I have all the images together, and you can do some different settings here. So if I look at the block and I select, I'm gonna have to, how do I do this? I have to select, or maybe it's the post. There's a way to edit the gallery, which is kind of annoying. Okay, maybe here. No, I don't want to do, I don't want to edit the individual one. I want to edit the whole gallery. How do I do that? Oops, I don't want to do that. Oops. Oh, I had it for a second. Okay. Okay, if I drag over everything, no, that's just all of the blocks. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to delete these and upload this gallery. Hmm. Maybe they changed this. There used to be a way that you could make them all sit next to each other. Oh, select parent block. Okay. That's okay. That's how you do it. Okay. So I think that's different. So I have to click on here and go to select parent block. And now I can edit the gallery. And so I can change the number of columns. So I can make them all sit next to each other. Or if I want them to be a little bit bigger, I can do 2 by 2. And I can turn off crop images if I want. I don't think that matters because they're all square. And yeah, I can change a couple other things, but that's basically, what I would want to do. And so let's take a look and see if that looks okay. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty good. And then of course, if I was submitting this, I would just put a link to my code down here. And I don't want to embed, so I'm going to say convert to link. And that's pretty much all I have to do to submit this assignment. So yeah, I just wanted to go over that. I haven't covered that in a while, and go over the gallery block. Okay, so I think that's everything that we need to cover. I'm going to stop the recording here.